Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. You may notice my voice is a little strange. I have come down with a viral bronchitis that I've been fighting off for a few days. It's funny. I'll get into the recipe here in just a minute, and then we'll get to the herbs. Great herb for the week. Actually, I'll go and tell you, it's Celandine, one of the most famous herbs of European medicine, which we generally consider to be a weed here in the United States. Once again, our ancestors brought it here to be used. Well, most of our weeds are brought here to be used as food and medicine, and we've forgotten that. And well, I guess they're still not useless because they provide a multi-billion-dollar annual source of revenue for morons who try to kill them. They can have their nice, pretty lawns or play golf. And hey, if you like golf, if you like your lawn, it's your business. I took, I had to take golf in college as a PE. I did not enjoy it. I would much rather use that land for hunting rabbits or ducks on the ponds or fishing. But hey, if that's your thing, go for it. No, there's no skin off my nose. I just wish they would stop spraying so many pesticides and chemical fertilizers that get into our waterways and cause a lot of damage. But, it's a free country. It's a free-ish country, as I always say. It's certainly nowhere near as free as it used to be. But the recipe this week is going to be very interesting. It's one of those you can make with things you should have in your cabinet. Hopefully, you have them in your pantry for less than $1 to serve a couple of people. That's always great, especially in the era of Bidenomics. Yeah, there's a selling point for you. I gave you Bidenomics. Rock on, dude. Oh, my word, what a joke he is. What a pathetic joke he is. What a sad joke he is. But anyway, the month of October seems to be a month in which I have particularly bad luck. I don't know why. But if I think back, I was doing an interview with Jason White a few months ago, and he said, I've noticed you seem to be kind of accident prone. And I'm like, well, yeah, not really. It's just I have to do everything on my own because, I'm a single guy and I don't have anybody to help me. And so, um, I'll be like carrying a washing machine or a dryer into the house by myself. Or, and that was last year in the month of October. I was carrying one into the house and stepped funny and broke an ankle. Okay. Uh, this October, I was cutting a tree, and of course, no help, and I missed a rung coming down the ladder. It's pretty hard, when you don't have someone to hold a ladder for you, and you have to negotiate that, and you're carrying a chainsaw in one hand, and uh, I missed a rung, and I dropped probably about 10 feet, Really tore up my knee, either really sprained or broke my left foot, whereas I tore up the knee on the right foot. So I haven't been getting around real well for about a little more than a week now. Thinking back, it was October, maybe 4 years ago, when I'm driving through an extremely rural area in South Carolina, in the swampy areas. Biggest deer I've ever seen in my life came right out into the road and charged my truck, and I kept, changing lanes, hitting the brakes. I did everything I could to avoid this deer, and he charged me head on and, wrecked my truck. And that was the first bad injury to my knee. And when I think about it, I remember, yeah, October has been a tricky month for me. Going even way back when I was maybe 21, 22, and in the mountains, Appalachian Mountains, if you got a friend and we're getting ready for the winter, we go out and help each other cut wood. So I had some trees on our property that my mother's property actually that needed to be cut, and he was going to come over and with his chainsaw, and we'd each go out there with our chainsaws, cut the trees, and then cut them into logs. It's actually called bucking them into logs. That's terminology used on the mountain. And then let them season a little bit, and then I'd go over to his house and do the same. And then we'd go to each other's house and split the wood, for the winter. We did this for several years in a row. He was a great guy, bit of a pothead, and he did not tell me he was quite high when he was cutting wood with me that day, and he cut a tree on me. Yep, I'm perfectly sober there with my chainsaw, cutting a tree on. It was a fairly steep slope, and that's actually what saved my life. And he decided to cut a very large oak tree in my direction, and it fell on me, knocked me to the ground, pinned me down. Chainsaw was going wildly in one direction. I was able to, drop it, and it, turns off when you take your finger off the trigger. That could have literally cut my head off if I had not been aware enough to, throw the chainsaw away from me essentially. And I was pinned under the ground. I wasn't crushed because it was a steep slope. The tree just literally came down on me and pinned me down. And I just yelled out, "You blanky, blanky, come cut this tree off of me." And he did, laughing at me the whole time, hysterically, of course. Yeah, I got pretty beat up from that one. I can probably say that most of my major injuries have come during the month of October, and I have no idea why. So anyway, I'm sitting here trying to recover from, you know, knee swollen up like a volleyball, foot probably fractured, maybe just a really bad sprain, lots of bruising from falling off this ladder. I was about a little more than a week ago. So just kind of making do, uh, just making do, you know. And Friday comes along. And you may know, I mentioned it before, I eat fish on Fridays. I abstain from meat on Fridays. It's an old Catholic tradition. Now mostly just done through Lent, but if possible, I try to do it all Fridays. It's something, it's not a exclusively Catholic thing. The bottom line is, Christ was crucified on a Friday. So as he gave up his flesh on Friday, we give up eating meat on Friday. Just an old tradition, reminds you of your faith, helps you be a little more aware, helps you remember to say a few extra prayers on a Friday, especially at 3 p.m., which is when he died. That's known as the hour of mercy, by the way. If you want to look into that, 3 p.m., especially on a Friday, is the hour of mercy. So, of course, I've been stuck home for several days, not moving around a whole lot, using a cane, and really, because, I got both legs messed up, not getting around, and I seem to have developed some kind of bronchial and sinus virus. So I've been pretty sick too. In fact, I was throwing up all yesterday. Not fun, not fun at all. But that's why we learn about herbs, so we have the herbs to help. For instance, to avoid the nausea and to get some food in me, I can get a little bit of bitters. It helps the digestion. It gets, it really does help actually. I can use thyme as an expectorant. I've got herbs I'm using for the pain and the swelling and the inflammation, from turmeric to, Oh, I got lots of stuff. Skull cap, I'm taking care of things. But suddenly I realize it's Friday morning, and if possible, I don't want to eat meat. And I haven't got a lot in the house, you know, because I haven't been able to get out a lot. And I remembered I've got a can of sardines. Now, I love sardines. I like them a lot. But sardines is not a meal for a full day. Now, breakfast I got by with just fine, half a bagel with cream cheese, no big deal. But for, the rest of the day and night, I got to have something to eat. And I remembered that a real traditional, I think it's generally Italian, but I think they do this in Spain, probably Greece as well. But I know Italy and Spain do this, and actually France has a version of it as well. Is a tomato sauce, like a spaghetti type sauce, with sardines as the meat. All right, now a lot of you are freaking out right now because you never developed a taste for sardines. But thanks to my grandfather, I learned to love sardines, and I particularly like very mild tasting, mildly seasoned canned sardines. There are many imported varieties. There's a wonderful one, the Polar brand. It makes the best smoked sardines you'll ever have. They're not fishy, they're not strong smelling. So I think, I love to combine tomatoes with seafood, when I make soups. Normally I make a New England style clam chowder, but occasionally I do the Manhattan style clam chowder with tomatoes. A lot of times I'll do fish soups with tomato and wine and herbs and all this really good stuff. Um, Shrimp, absolutely. I gave you my recipe recently for shrimp a la Creole. That is shrimp in a spicy fish sauce. And I thought, well, why couldn't we do a sardine in tomato sauce to go with pasta? That would turn this can of sardines into a full meal, right? So, made up the regular tomato sauce. Okay, I've given this recipe before. I'll just go through it briefly. Chop fine onions and garlic. Get your onions going in some olive oil. Once the onions are translucent, add the garlic, which I smash it and chop it. It's not just sliced. You don't want to burn your garlic. To that, we are going to add herbs like especially oregano, a little bit of basil. I always add a pinch of parsley, usually a pinch of rosemary, but oregano and basil are the two main ones, along with the garlic. Definitely some crushed red pepper or pepper flake, whatever you want to say it. Salt and pepper. Some crushed tomatoes that, of course, this time of year always have canned. Good natural crushed tomatoes. A little more olive oil, salt and pepper to taste. Long simmer. It's good stuff. It's fantastic, right? So I tasted that, and I thought, man, that's a good sauce. It's a good sauce. And I take the sardines, chop them up, put them in with the sauce. Oddly enough, the sardines made the tomato sauce taste sweet. Now, I never add sugar to my, I don't care, spaghetti sauce, bolognese, red sauce, whatever you want to call it, right? No way. No sugar for me. So I taste it. It's like, wow, where'd the sugar come from? So I started thinking about how can I adjust this sauce a little bit. Well, seafood and wine go well together. So, and wine will add a little acidity to it. Throw in a little bit of wine. Okay, that's better. I want something briny. I want some salty. I want some sour. Some olives. Chop them up. Put it in. That's better. A little Parmesan cheese. Got on, Substack and Twitter actually, and started asking people advice on this. Got a lot of Italian American friends on there, and they said, yeah, the olives are the way to go. Kalamata, if you got them. Capers are very good. That's actually more of a French influence. The salty cheese, the wine, a little lemon zest. Just to give me different ideas. And uh, one friend of mine said, and some breadcrumbs on top and bake it a little bit. Oh, well, that's an interesting idea. Anyway, comes together an excellent, excellent sardine and tomato sauce over spaghetti noodles. That was it. Just, grab. I think I had in my cabinet maybe three kinds of pasta and spaghetti I could get without reaching very high, leaning on a cane. And yeah, really good. And my dog loved it too. So actually, I've told you before, my dog loves fish. My dog loves spice. the more hot pepper you put in there. And the other thing that I added to it was actually a few dashes of habanero pepper sauce. I thought, this needs a little green pepper flavor. I've already got the hot, crushed red pepper flake in there. A little bit of habanero pepper sauce, not a lot. So anyway, he's in there begging for it, underfoot, about to trip me with my cane. And I've got one hand on the cane. I'm leaning on the counter with the other hand, pretty bad, and coughing my full head off. And he's in there trying to throw me on the ground so he can take my food. That's a border collie for you, So I'm like, all right, I don't know if you like this. I give him a bite. He goes crazy. He wants more. Ended up getting 4 servings, two nice big ones for me and 2 small ones for the dog, out of 1 can of sardines and about a half a can of crushed tomatoes, a few spices, a splash of this, a dash of that, and what? 10 cents worth of pasta, 20 cents worth of pasta. I don't know. So, keep these staples, these things you need in your pantry, and you can combine these flavors. And when you find yourself in a pinch, throw it together and see what happens, right? I end up making, a dish that would probably sell for, $25 a plate in a restaurant. Seriously, you just give a different name for sardine, call it by, I don't even know what the Italian is for sardines. Probably something very close to sardines, actually. But anyway, I mean, give it a name in a different, a different language. And yeah, another thing, one of my Italian friends told me, Christina, she said that, no, wait, maybe, no, she was the one who gave me a tip on the breadcrumbs. It was someone else. It was a guy. Um, I don't know his actual name. He goes by Bear, I think. Anyway, he said anchovies better than sardines, and I think without a doubt, I would prefer the anchovy. It wouldn't have given the sweetness to the sauce. There's an enzyme in sardines. I actually looked this up. There is actually a component of sardines, probably an enzyme, that interacts with the chemical composition of a tomato, which brings out the sugar. So I do think anchovy would have been preferable, but heck, I mean, that was darn good eating. Really good. And I actually finished it off for breakfast this morning. So, I mean, think about having, sardines and tomato sauce for breakfast. It's got to be good if you're willing to do that. So, you know, that's my recipe for the day. And it's just really more of an example of keeping certain staples on hand. I always have some rice, some beans, some canned tomatoes, you know, little frozen meat in the freezer, can of sardines, some can of clams. You come up with amazing things. So potatoes and onions. Um, I had to drag myself out in this condition, literally, this week, to buy turkeys from one grocery store that had frozen whole turkeys for 99 cents a pound, and russet potatoes at another grocery store that had them 5 pounds for $2. So, I mean, you got to stock up when you can, and if you do, maybe you don't have to go out when you're in such bad shape. So, y'all wish me well. A few prayers for speedy recovery would be appreciated. Oddly enough, it's the foot that's killing me. It's like every step, it's like so painful. But the coughing, I've got a cough button here, so you're not going to hear a lot of coughing, hopefully. But the coughing's been really bad, and when you got like broken bones, when you cough, it hurts. So I haven't been having a real fun time or sleeping very much. But chinep. Now this is chill. Let me see if I can get the Latin. Chelidonium. I'm gonna go with Chelodonium. Chelodonium magus. It's just magus the greater. It's the larger of actually a couple of versions of Chelidonium or Celandine. Now, Celandine or Celandine, depending on how you pronounce it, can often also be called a St. John's wort. It's not a true member of the St. John's wort family, but it has a very long history in herbal medicine. It is like one of those essentials in traditional herbal medicine that, again, like the dandelion and so many others, plantain is an excellent example, we think of as just a weed. And I do need to clarify, last week I talked about chickweed. And as I mentioned, there are some 15 different plants called chickweed. And the one I was talking about was Cerastium glomeratum, specifically, and other related plants that fit into the similarity or that have similar characteristics as Cerastium. It's clammy chickweed, mouse ear chickweed, etc. And a couple of folks got in touch and said, proper chickweed is Stellaria. Absolutely true. You're right. Good for you to remind me of that. Good for you to call me on that. Thank you, Tori. Thanks to another friend that pointed that out. When you're talking about 15 different plants that are all called chickweed because they all have almost identical characteristics, it can get really confusing. Stellaria media, that really is like the official chickweed, with the Cerastium being probably the next closest in line. But, you know, they're so similar and it gets so confusing because you got authors from different places of the world and different times and they just say chickweed. I gave up on the taxonomy. I just gave up on it. But I should have made that more clear. Anyway, Chelidonium celandine is not one we have so much confusion with. It's been its actual name has been documented since ancient Greece as Chelidonia. That's what Dioscorides called it. Many times you read Dioscorides and he's talking about an herb that's pretty common to us, and he gives it some weird Greek name. Well, Celandine or Chelidonia, as Dioscorides wrote of it, we have no confusion whatsoever. He said, well, he describes it. I'm just saying, type in Celandine. Let me see how you spell Celandine. Celandine. Make sure it's Chelidonium. It's a pretty wildflower. It probably grows just about everywhere in North America and may have made it into South America. I have no idea. All over Europe. Pretty common in Asia. You're going to find this one. And uh, just look it up and you're going to start spotting it. It's a really common one, but it's so useful. It is so very useful. It can even not only just have medicinal properties, but can be a substitute for saffron. And saffron, of course, is the most expensive herb on earth, worth 100 times by weight to gold because it grows from tiny little crocus flowers. And you have to get down on your hands and knees and take a pair of tweezers and pick each little stamen out of that crocus flower and imagine how much of that it would take to even make an ounce. You'd probably have 100 people working for a week just to make an ounce. So you can absolutely grow saffron yourself, by the way. And and George Herder listed several plants that can be used in place of saffron. I'll need to do a whole show on that at some point. But celandine is one of them. So anyway, he said the juice of this, that would be the celandine, mixed with honey and boiled in a brass jar over coals is good for sharpening the sight. I have no idea if the brass had anything to do with that, but we'll get into sort of the anti-inflammatory effects of this plant. The leaves, root, and fruit cure jaundice. No, the leaves, root, and fruit are juiced when they emerge in summer. The juice is dried in the shade and made into little balls. The root cures jaundice, taken in a drink with anise and white wine. Also applied with wine for herpes, out of the ground together with with herpes, the viral skin infection form of that, like cold sores essentially. It could be several forms of herpes actually. It lessens toothache if chewed, and it seems to be called Chelidonia because it springs out of the ground together with the swallow's appearance and withers with them departing. So swallows are a migratory bird, and so that's where it takes its name. from whence it takes its name. I'm going to get into Gerard here in just a second, the Elizabethan English, so I better, warm up to it, right? It appeareth from whence it taketh its appearance. Um, it also, well, we don't need to get into the different names among the Romans and the Egyptians and the Gauls and the Dacians and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, that was very much important at the time. Gerard did say, the juice of the herb is good to sharpen the sight, for it cleanseth and consumeth away slimy things that cleave to the ball of the eye. Well, it is somewhat anti-inflammatory. It also clears the mucus, essentially. Um, those that hinder the sight, especially being boiled with honey in a brazen vessel, as Dioscorides teacheth. So again, he's talking a copper pot. I don't really know why. Could be. Copper is an essential mineral. It's a metal that we need in our diet. We need some copper, and perhaps that has something to do with it. I have no idea. The root cureth the yellow jaundice, which cometh of the stopping of the gall, especially where there is no ague adjoined to it, for it openeth and delivereth the gall and liver from stoppings. What does that mean? Jaundice is, of course, a liver disorder. The liver can be overtaxed. Of course, there can be the heart condition that the great Louis Grizzard had, where he had a bad valve and it was like kicking out some of the red blood cells, and they had to go back through and be processed by the liver, and his skin turned yellow. You probably know jaundice as like an issue in children as they're babies. The livers are developing. It In this case, he's talking about liver congestion, essentially. That would be the stopping of the gall, the gall being digestive juices, and with no ague or fever with it. So some kind of blockage or inflammation, essentially. The root being chewed is reported to be good against the toothache. The juice must be drawn forth in the beginning of the summer and dried in the sun. This is exactly what Dioscorides said. So we're talking, good 1,500 years in between these two herbalists, minimum, and they're still giving the same recommendations. The root of celandine, boiled with anise seed, with white wine, openeth the stoppings of the liver, and cureth the jaundice very safely, as has been often proved. So within that 1,500 years, these had become like official remedies. This is what a doctor would prescribe for you. The root, now this is interesting though. The root cut in small pieces is good to be given unto hawks against sundry diseases, whereunto they are subject as worms, cray, and such like. Falconry was very big at this time, and birds have their own ailments, and apparently the root of celandine was supposed to be particularly good for hawks. I beats me. I've never. I have a friend that's into falconry. Maybe I can talk with her about that sometime. Maybe she can try that out and let us know. I don't ever see myself really going down that road. Honestly, I love birds. I got a lot of hawks that live in the area, and I enjoy seeing them. One of them actually, this is pretty interesting. Um, you know, okay. So I think it was probably last week's episode I mentioned how I'm particularly fond of ravens, right, and crows, right. Crows are very smart. They can count. They like to play games. They do all kinds of odd crow things. They're also rather loyal animals, and if you feed them, they'll come back, and they'll actually chase hawks away from your chickens and such. They're really neat critters to have around. Um, there was a hawk that I kept seeing every day, and I didn't mess with it, and I didn't bother it. I just stand there and look at it, and it'd look at me. And probably about 6 months passed, and one day I'm out walking, and this hawk swoops down and kills, in an instant, just snap the neck of probably the largest gray squirrel I've ever seen. I mean, like 3 pounds. He was almost the size of a fox squirrel, big old gray squirrel. Circled around and dropped it at my feet. I'm not kidding you. I mean, I am telling you the God's honest truth. I mean, birds are something, y'all. I mean, they really are. You know, I've got almost a pet owl that comes around in wintertime. When there's no fire in the fireplace, he'll swoop down the chimney and perch up on the pie safe, and he just wants to hang out with me for a while. Feed him some sardines, and he'll stay all winter. Birds are really cool animals. I enjoy them. I enjoy them a lot. Doesn't mean I don't eat them. I definitely, am a hunter, but there are some that are particularly smart. I'll just put it that way, particularly smart. Just really fun to be around. And then, of course, you got your livestock birds like chickens, which can just be like pets. They can be hilarious, and they're the wonderfully tasty meat. I love turkeys. Oh man, I mean, I'm a turkey fanatic. I mean, like the A Christmas Story. When he talks about his dad, he says the old man was a turkey fanatic. Well, I am. I love to eat turkey. I actually prefer roast turkey to roast chicken, which is like heresy to someone with French heritage. Love it, absolutely love it. Uh, oh, if I had to choose, I'd rather have duck, and I'd rather have goose than duck. Really do enjoy. But I'm being a single guy. I have three living relatives, none of whom like duck or geese. So I rarely, because it's just me, I don't roast a whole duck for myself. I usually, cut the breasts off and pan sear them, pan fry them, do a confit of the legs and such. Never do I get to eat a goose because I can't eat it all. I mean, yeah, now I do smoke meat, so you can smoke duck or goose, and it's more like pork, really. But if you have a family, wow, if they like eating goose, I don't see how you can go wrong with a roast goose. I mean, that used to be the absolute holiday treat. Going back to like Dickens' time. Think of like a Christmas Carol. It was the roast goose that was the centerpiece of the meal. We've gotten so far out of that, mainly because turkeys are easier to raise. They can be raised in more modern ways than geese can, but uh, you cannot beat a roast goose. You absolutely, just absolutely fantastic. But right now, like I said, I got my limit of turkeys at 99 cents a pound, and they're actually natural turkeys, not anything weird in there. No, they're not backyard fowl, and of course I have qualms with buying commercially raised poultry, but still delicious. And I've got a turkey in the oven right now, and I think my border collie may attack me and steal it before it's done. But anyway, if something happens to me, if you hear me screaming, I am being attacked by a small uh, 16-year-old, mostly blind, deaf border collie who absolutely loves to eat. He and I, we have been an inseparable pair for 16 years. He's probably more like 18, believe it or not. Believe it or not, I was out in the middle of nowhere, timber country, um, driving along, hadn't seen a house or a store or another person for miles. And here's this little border collie. I mean, he doesn't weigh more than 20 pounds. He's just the run of the litter that never grow up. And he's on his hind legs howling in the middle of the road. I stopped the car, the truck, got out, said, "Come here." He got and came to me. I put him in the truck. We drove away. And for the past 16 years, he has sat beside me in the truck, um, sat beside me in the den, or sat in my lap, been right beside me in the kitchen, slept on my bed, right by my knees, actually. He will tuck in. So annoying, actually. He knows he does this too. A very smart dog. Um, if I turn over in the night, it wakes him up. So what he actually does is tuck in behind my knees so that I can't turn over. Dog's crazy smart. We were in a vehicle one day that had automatic windows. My old truck doesn't. I've got the old hand crank windows. And so he goes over and he's looking out the window and he put his paw on the button and the window came down. I rolled it up. He looked at me, put his paw on the button, rolled the window down. He did it about 3 times. He had figured out how to put that window down. Uh, I'm gonna miss that dog. I'm telling you. Anyway, the Gerard goes on and says, I have by experience found that the juice of the great celandine dropped into small green wounds of what sort whatsoever wonderfully cures them. Green wounds are generally fresh wounds. We're not talking old sores, ulcers, as they would call them at the time. I don't think we're necessarily talking gangrene here. Uh, but, maybe it does have some antibiotic properties. I don't know. But usually when we're talking green wounds, he's talking fresh wounds. Miss Grieve in the 1930s said well, she made a big distinction between the greater celandine, which she called the true celandine, or dine, I guess, with the common or lesser celandine. She found the larger one, that's actually the more common weed here in America, to be the more potent medicinally. And she again tells how it was associated with the swallows migration. She said it is one of 24 herbs mentioned in Mercer's Herbal. In the 14th century, a drink made with celandine was supposedly to be good was supposed to be good for the blood. Clusius, the celebrated Dutch botanist, considered the juice dropped into small green wounds, again, what we just discussed, affected a rapid cure. And when dropped into the eye, it would take away specks and stop incipient suffusions, that means running of the eyes. The old alchemist held that it was good to super stifle the jaundice. Well, it was good for jaundice again, liver disorders, because of its intensely yellow color. Again, one of the reasons it's used as a substitute for saffron, that intense yellow color, which will dye your food, essentially. If you've ever had a paella, the rice is so bright yellow, and that's saffron. The whole herb is collected in the wild state. They had at this point identified the alkaloids chelidonine and chelorethrin. The latter has narcotic properties, which are actually poisonous in large amounts. The two alloyed alkaloids, homochelidonine and homochelidonine, okay, and propotine and sanguarinine comprises natural bitter principle. Any of these things isolated, not the natural herb, could obviously have side effects. Medicinal actions and uses, she says, alterative, diuretic, purgative. So in a large amount, it could be, sort of like a laxative, essentially. It is used in jaundice, eczema, scrofulous diseases. Those are generally glandular swellings. The infusion of 1 ounce of the dried herb to a pint of boiling water, taken in wineglassful doses. The infusion is a cordial and greatly promotes perspiration. It helps break a fever, so another good aspect. The addition of a few aniseeds, making a decoction of the herb in wine, has been held to increase its efficacy in removing obstructions of liver and the gall. Going back to the Dioscorides again. The fluid extract said was good for overcoming torpid conditions of the liver. This is an underactive liver, essentially. And good for the worst forms of scurvy. That's when your teeth start to fall out. That's bad scurvy. Not pleasant at all. The orange-colored acrid juice, commonly used fresh to cure warts, ringworms, and corn. So apparently it has an acrid quality, which means it's almost like acidic. It will actually, if you ever had a wart and you got that stuff from the drugstore and you put it on there and it kind of burned it off, that's what we're talking about. But it should not be allowed to come in contact with any other part of the skin. So apparently it can be, I think it is actually in the buttercup family, if I remember correctly, which the whole family has the ranunculus, I think, Ranunculaceae family, has those irritating blistering qualities. So there's so many that are used in herbal medicine, but always have to be used with a little bit of care. In milk, she said it was applied as an eye lotion to remove white opaque spots on the cornea. Wow, okay, that's very useful. Mixed with sulfur, it was formerly used to cure the itch, which I think was probably scabies, could have been crabs. Anyway, ointment made from the roots and lard boiled together, also of the leaves and flowers, has been used with advantage for piles or hemorrhoids. Celandine is a very popular medicine in Russia, where it's said to have proved effective in cases of cancer. And I never recommend anything for cancer, so you have to look into that one yourself. And the Irish tradition, which she also mentioned was still used in Suffolk at that time for toothaches. In the Irish tradition, John Kehoe said, it is an excellent medicine to preserve the eyesight. It removes inflammation, specks, and film from the eyes, and can also strengthen them. The root removes obstructions of the liver and spleen and cures the jaundice. A strong decoction is very good against skin eruptions, ringworms, and scorbutic sores. That's scurvy. King's Medical Dispensatory of 1898 said, it is stimulant, acrid, alterative, diuretic, diaphoretic, purgative, and vulnerary. I think you probably know most of these terms by now. Stimulant means stimulates. Acrid means irritating acid, sort of like. Alterative means it can gradually bring one back to health. Diuretic means it helps remove excess fluids. Diaphoretic means it can help break a fever. Purgative means it can be a laxative. And vulnerary means it helps heal wounds. The juice, when applied to the skin, produces inflammation and even vesication. That's when the skin becomes red and irritated, and it kind of brings up the little blood vessels. So you don't want to mess with that a whole lot. Just putting the raw juice on the skin, just like all members of the ranunculus family. Has long been known as a caustic for removal of warts. Also applied to indolent ulcers, fungus, and growth. Is used for removing specks and opacities from the cornea and in curing ringworms. Let's see, it said it was superior to arnica as a vulnerary or wound healing. Alcoholic tincture made from the root found unrivaled as an external application to prevent or subdue traumatic inflammations. Well, that's really interesting because arnica is the go-to for bruising and injury, sprained ankles, and things like I'm dealing with right now. And apparently, according to King's Medical Dispensatory of 1898, which was part of official medicine, a little more than 100 years ago, even better than arnica. So definitely want to look into this plant. I do not have any on hand. I will next year. After reading this and knowing what Octobers usually mean for me, apparently, I will have, God willing, some Celandine on hand next year at this time. Used internally as a decoction or tincture and externally as a poultice or ointment for scrofula, cutaneous diseases, skin diseases, piles or hemorrhoids. Likewise useful in hepatic affections as liver, and is supposed to exert a special influence on the spleen. It is a remedy influencing the parts supplied with nerve force from the branches of the solar plexus and with blood from the hepatic artery, and to some extent by the splenic artery. Both acute and subacute forms of inflammations of the liver, when suppurative action has not set in, are benefited by chelidonium. Migraine, bilious headaches, neuralgia, bilious dyspepsia, headache, and other gastric and intestinal disturbances due to faulty action of the liver are well treated with it. It is a remedy for the so-called liver cough. I'm not going to speculate what that is, but I think I have an idea, actually. The liver can get inflamed, and okay, so if you've ever been running, I guess I am speculating. Let's speculate. You've ever been running and you get the stitch in your side? It's because what's the name of it? The membrane that essentially surrounds the lungs. Like when you get pleurisy, it's an inflammation of that membrane. The abdominal cavity and that area of the lungs begin to kind of rub together, and they cause that stitch in the side. That's a very simplified way of looking at it, okay? But when the liver gets very inflamed, it can also kind of push things in that way, and you get that same stitch in your side. But because it's putting actually pressure on the lungs, it can cause a cough. Now, I don't know if that's what they're talking about, um, but I think that would be rather likely. Good for hemorrhoids, hepatic and splenic congestion, gastrointestinal disorders due to capillary enlargement of the viscera are conditions for its exhibition. It is one of the best remedies for biliary catarrh, that's congestion, the result of hepatic congestion, well, just like I said, and for jaundice due to obstructions of the bile ducts, mucous membranes which are swollen from the subacute inflammations present. I'm a little short of breath. You can probably tell that. All right. Full, tensive, or throbbing pain in the right hypochondrium. Okay, that's actually the stitch in the side. That's actually what I was just explaining. And this can also happen, pain extending to beneath the right scapula. The inflamed liver can actually cause a back pain under the right shoulder blade, essentially. Um, so it was good for that. Especially if the tongue is pallid or enlarged, the skin sallow, full and occasionally tinged greenish yellow. This is all liver issues. So very good liver herb. For specific uses and indications, full, pale, sallow tongue, mucous membrane, skin pale and sallow, sometimes greenish, hepatic congestion, jaundice due to swollen bile ducts, sluggish hepatic action, cough with hepatic pain, fullness with tensive or throbbing pain in the hypochondrium, and pain extending to the right shoulder, melancholia, headaches, and gastric disorders dependent upon faulty actions of the liver. So, yeah, we'll wrap this up pretty soon. Haven't got enough breath to keep going. But in the Polish tradition, Sophie Hoderick-Snab tells us that Celandine had great herbal, cultural, and religious significance, featured in the botanical carvings that decorate the Marian altar of St. Mary's Church in Krakow, dating to around 1500. That's actually a very big deal in Poland. St. Mary's Church in Krakow is a major religious site, and the carvings in that church are jaw-dropping. Christ is depicted as a gardener and shown holding the lily of the valley, the dead nettle, and the celandine. That showed that these three herbs were considered gifts from God essential to life in Poland around 1500. And Poland does have one of the richest, most intact traditions of herbal medicine in the entire world. Celandine, among its other uses, was a popular cure for warts. Well, we know it has that acrid quality. Dietrich Cohen and Adam Siegel tell us that this herb's used by the Ashkenazi Jews. A lot of crossover between the Ashkenazi Jews, the Poles, the Ukrainians, the Russians. I like to always kind of put these together. She said that celandine was very common in the Pale. Those were the Jewish settlements in Central Europe at the turn of the 20th century, and could be found in shady places, especially in forests. At that time, the plant's toxic constituents were unknown, so warnings of possible harmful effects were not yet stated. In Ritsev, juice from the fresh plant was drunk for constipation, and a decoction made from the dried plant was taken for kidney diseases. For pain and fainting spells in Polana and Tichon, a strongly brewed plant decoction was drunk. It was also used to wash the scalp. Celandine was the plant most commonly used for treating skin diseases and wounds. As in contemporary Russian practice, the fresh juice of the plant or root was poured or rubbed on warts. A plant decoction was used for the same purpose in Polana, Anapol, Balti, Labinia, Roman, and one that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Wish I could get my Ukrainian friend to tell me how to pronounce Yelisaveti Grod. I told her one time, I asked her, what's the matter with you people? Do you know what it's like to try to transcribe something that has like no vowels? It's 27 consonants and maybe a U and an A somewhere in it. And she just laughed. Anyway, great sense of humor. I generally find that Polish and Ukrainian people have fantastic sense of humor. It's actually true of Romanians, Russians, and Hungarians as well. But they have a way of, how would I put it? They don't let you know they think it's funny. They have a way of kind of provoking people a little bit. Yeah, I love my Eastern European friends. Always have. The same preparation was a remedy for wounds in that same place, and one that starts with a Z and a V. So I'm not even going to try to get into Zvinigorodka. No way. I'm sure I pronounced that horribly. And you're talking like Sebastian Gorka. Anyway, um, she says that in Broslev, the fresher steam plant was applied to abscesses and the root rubbed on wounds caused by venereal diseases. So we're talking again the syphilis and such, which are not specified in the source, but echo the German preparation of the period for syphilis. So there you go. In Roman, Lubny, Kiev, Anapole, and Polania, my friend's actually from Anapole, by the way, Balte, and one I couldn't begin to pronounce, the juice of the decoction of the plant was rubbed on locally, or a bath was made with the decoction of the plant to heal skin disorders such as itching, eczema, herpes, scrofula, and rash. Celandine flowers and herbs and leaves were used to treat liver diseases in Schwarztime, maybe. And I can't do any more of that. Also good for glaucoma, a white opacity at the corner of the eye, and a formation of white spots on the cornea. So in America, Jethro Kloss wrote in the 1920s that it was alternative, antispasmodic, caustic, diuretic, and purgative. Caustic's a good explanation for acrid. Caustic, yes. He said, the fresh juice mixed with vinegar may be applied for the removal of warts and corns. It may also be made into an ointment to be used on various skin diseases such as ringworm, eczema, etc. When taken internally as an infusion, it is good for diseases of the stomach, gallbladder, and liver. It may also be useful in asthma. Take 1 or 2 capsules daily. But do not confuse this herb with the smaller or lesser celandine, commonly known as pilewort. Interesting, okay? Pilewort would say that it's specifically good for hemorrhoids, but apparently was not good for all the other uses. And he cautioned against giving this herb to children. Going to modern use, Plants for a Future says, medicinal use of greater celandine. Greater celandine has a long history of herbal use. Traditionally, it was employed as an ophthalmic, that means for the eyes, to treat and clear the eyesight, whilst in modern herbal medicine, it is used more as a mild sedative. Remember, it said one of the components had a narcotic property. An antispasmodic and detoxifying herb, relaxing the muscles of the bronchial tubes, intestines, and other organs. The latex is much used to externally treat warts. That's generally when they say there's a caustic plant or there's an acrid plant. It's going to be one that contains a latex. Common milkweed, for instance, has a latex that can be very caustic. If you get that sap in your eyes, it can actually blind you. But it's very good for other, especially its cousin pleurisy root, which I could probably use some of right now. Very useful plant, and actually a good, the regular milkweed, the shoots are a great wild edible. They're much like asparagus, but a lot of these plants that have that milky sap do have that quality. Then there's one, sanguinaria bloodroot. Bloodroot. It grows in my backyard. I'm very blessed to have a lot of rare herbs in my backyard. It has a blood red sap, and it's fantastic for removing well, people used it for skin cancers. I mean, not just moles and warts and such, because it's actually in the poppy family, and it will burn a hole in your skin while numbing out the area. So you can see how these plants are very useful, but could also be quite dangerous. Should not be used by an amateur, I guess you'd say. I don't like using that word because amateur actually means someone that does something for the love of it and not for money. So most of us are amateurs in one regard or another, but you really need to know what you're doing with such plants before you use them. Okay, so about the latex, the leaves. Oh, caution should be employed, especially when the plant is used internally, however, because it contains toxic alkaloids. The leaves and sap are acrid, alterative, anodyne, antispasmodic, caustic, cholagogue, diuretic, hydragogue, narcotic, and purgative. They are used in the treatment of bronchitis, whooping cough, asthma, jaundice, gallstones, gallbladder complaints. The plant is harvested in the spring when it comes into flower. It is best used fresh, but it can also be used dried for later use. The roots can also be used. These are harvested in the autumn and dried for later use. Um, the plant has anti-cancer properties, so again, look into that. I never say something is good for cancer, but I will recommend one look into it. And it is analgesic, meaning it can reduce pain. It is an important component of a stomach ulcer drug. They don't say which. The plant has abundant, acrid, bright orange sap. And if you see a bright orange, milky sap, you can pretty much configure that's going to be pretty nasty if it gets on your skin. Um, it stains the skin and is a powerful irritant. It is used externally as a treatment to rid of warts, ringworm, and corns, and has also been used to remove the films from the cornea and the eye. The plant contains the alkaloid Celandine, which is similar to the alkaloid paverine, so that comes from poppies. So again, like the bloodroot, you're getting some alkaloids that have a somewhat opiate effect. This alkaloid is antispasmodic and has sedative effects on the bile duct and bronchi. However, results have been inconsistent, especially in the preparation, if the preparation is not fresh. The plant also contains the alkaloid spartine, which restores normal rhythm to feeble arrhythmic myocardia. Okay, so that there should be a lot of cautions with what they just said. Okay, not only can the sap burn your skin. Okay, while the plant is very useful for, I mean, gosh, look at all this, the listing of. No wonder it's been so important in herbal medicine for thousands of years. Um, it can mess with your heart rate rhythm. Yeah, and it has some similarities to opium poppy. Um, I have never actually read of a documented death from bloodroot, for instance, but a lot of people got really sick trying to get high off of it. So I'm going to put these plants with that milky sap seem to have a lot of common characteristics, and actually the poppy is probably among the least dangerous as far as side effects, but of course that can kill you. Opiates can kill you, so you always want to be really, really careful. And interesting also that in Poland it was shown with the lily of the valley, which also has an effect over the heart rate. It has a digitalis-like effect. The Peterson Field Guide said the fresh stem juice is a folk remedy used externally for warts, eczema, ringworms, corns. Root tincture, once used by physicians for inflammations, hemorrhoids, taken internally for jaundice, lung ailments, and is a diuretic. Fresh leaves, once used for amenorrhea, poultice for wounds, folk cancer remedy in China. Warning, toxic, stem juice, highly irritating, allergenic, may cause paralysis. There's one I hadn't seen before. And we'll get up to just what doctors would look at, the physician's desk reference for herbal medicine. Celandine has a mild analgesic, pain-killing, choligistic, antimicrobial, anesthetic, and central sedative effects. Central sedative would be, again, like the opium. Um, It also acts as a spasmolytic on smooth muscles, which is why it's good for coughs and bronchitis and all that. In animal tests, celandine is cytostatic. It has a non-specific immune stimulating effect. That's why we see it in so many old herbal cold remedies. It has a non-specific immune stimulating effect. The blood pressure lowering effects and therapeutic efficacy for mild forms of hypertonia, borderline hypertonia, need further investigation. So, I mean, even the physician's desk reference says it's probably a very useful herb. Under unproven uses, it says celandine was used for spasmodic pain in the bile ducts, the gastrointestinal tract. In folk medicine, it was used for skin conditions such as blister, rashes, scabies, and warts. It is said to be effective in the treatment of um, um, I can't pronounce this. I'm sorry. I know the word. It is cholecystitis, cholecytis, I guess, and same thing, cholelithiasis. That's a tongue. Those are tongue twisters for me. That's worse than trying to pronounce the name of a town in Ukraine. Catarrhal jaundice, again, that's congestion of the liver. Gastroenteritis and latent liver and gallbladder complaints. It has been used for intestinal polyps and breast lumps. That's actually also a very old use for this plant. I hadn't gotten into that because what if they're cancerous? I try to stay away from telling someone if you think or know you have cancer, here's an herb you can use. I just plain don't do that. You're going to have to look into it on your own and make your own decisions, but that is a folk use. Other uses include angina pectoris, cramps, asthma, arteriosclerosis, high blood pressure, stomach cancer, gout, edema, and hepatitis. Now this is interesting now. The physician's desk reference for herbal medicine then states, no health hazards or side effects are known in conjunction with proper administrative designated therapeutic dosages. So, while we may look at this plant as, on the one hand, almost a panacea, I mean, it's literally one of the most powerful and useful herbs that we've discussed. And then we can look at its potential toxicity and the dangerous elements of it. The physician's desk reference is telling modern practicing doctors no known health hazards or side effects are known in conjunction with the proper administration of designated therapeutic dosages. So, in other words, if you want to use this plant, you need to study it, you need to learn about it, you need to learn how to use it. And then it's probably a fairly safe and useful and effective plant. I mean, just remember, you can overdose on aspirin. You can die from drinking too much water. Um, there's no excuse for being ignorant when it comes to taking herbal medicine, using herbs for your health or the health of your family and loved ones. You just have to learn, and it's a lifetime learning process. I can tell you, I began my herbal apprenticeship at about the age of 15. I've been doing this for 30 years now, and I learn something new every day. And that's what keeps me interested, so I don't mind it at all. But anybody who thinks they can take a course at an herb school for a few months or even a couple of years and they're going to know everything, no, it's not going to happen. All right, y'all. I'm going to sign off and get something hot to drink. Like I said, I could use a couple prayers. I'm in kind of bad shape right now, but I'm not complaining. In my tradition, any pain, sickness, discomfort, um, sadnesses, grief, etc., are just an opportunity to do penance. We can do penance for ourselves and for others. And so any suffering is an opportunity to, as St. Paul said in the Bible, unite our sufferings with Christ in order to fulfill his mission. If you're of a different religious perspective or none at all, just look at it as keeping a good attitude, which I always try to have, though I fail quite often. But anyway, y'all, have a great one, and I will talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.